you can just shut your camera off. That way these are available. Okay. Okay, so welcome everybody to the first of our lecture series. I don't know why the closed captioning is on, but perhaps it'll be good for someone who's watching this later. You can do it without sound. The purpose of this space I'm creating is kind of a add-on to our 8-week chronic pain group that we had. We had 8 Mondays in a row, and I don't know about the people in the group, but after it was over, I missed everybody. And there really seemed to be a need for some support. So this is kind of a combination support group slash lecture where different people will come in, and some of you are invited. Anyone can present. It doesn't have to be like this on a PowerPoint. But either a time that we're going to come learn about health issues, or maybe we just want to talk about something from our life that isn't pain, and it's just a space for us to get together and learn things. So that's kind of the idea behind this, and we'll see how it goes. Gabriella, I don't want to take too long. I don't want to take more than 45 minutes. So can you kind of let me know when we're at about 35 minutes, and I can make sure I get everything in. I tend to be very long.
So you wanted to end at what time?
Whatever 45 minutes is from now.
Okay. Yep.
Okay. So why are we so sick? Us being sick is not an accident at all. And I really wanted to start with this as I think all of us know inherently that we're more sick now than in the past. I think we've all heard about the paleo diet. We've heard all kinds of things. And one of the things I want everyone to do is sometime in here, if you grab a piece of paper, or even on your notepad on your phone, if you could list 5 things that you know of that you think are why we're getting so many autoimmune diseases and so much chronic illness, just 5, anything, could be anything, just to jot those down. So this quote is from Gabor Mate. Those of you who don't know him, he is a trauma, he's actually a doctor, but he specializes in trauma. And he wrote a book called The Myth of Normal, which I highly recommend, because it's really about exactly what we're talking about, is that we're living in a place that's not built for us. And by going back through history, we can see why. But if we could begin to see much illness itself, not as a cruel twist of fate or some nefarious mystery, but rather as an expected and therefore normal consequence of abnormal, unnatural circumstances, it would have revolutionary implications for how we approach everything health related. This is a nice photo of LA in the 70s, where they had a really bad smog problem. And that's why California actually was one of the first states to start working on pollution, because this was unlivable. I have friends that live through this that have terrible respiratory issues. So most of our issues are an evolutionary mismatch. We were not put on this planet to be sitting under that kind of smog. I had a past life, had a few past lives. One of them was I was a working geologist. I got a master's degree in geology, and I was a practicing geologist for 8 years after that. And I got to travel to some of the most wonderful countries on earth and go to the absolute shittiest parts of all of them. But it became pretty clear to me early on when I started my graduate program that this was not for me. I liked the idea and the wonder of geology, but when you get into PhDs, you find that you're very, you get a very narrow scope. So my thesis, I was literally like measuring little tiny beds, like you can see up here, this is me. Like that's what my field work was. I like this picture because on this day that I went and saw this, I had my very first migraine. I didn't know what was going on. I had this terrible headache and everybody felt bad for me, and it was my first one. So I kind of like that it's documented in here. Most geologists tend to be introverts. I'm obviously not an introvert. So I essentially made a decision after having some difficulty traveling that I didn't like this enough to keep doing it. And I went and I had my children, and then I became interested in therapy. I was becoming interested in therapy during my job because everybody was having nervous breakdowns. And I was also fascinated with how they could find this so interesting because I really did not find it that interesting at a certain point. But it gave me this view of the world. Okay, come on. So I'm going to jump way back to the beginning for just a little bit, and this is where I'm going to try not to take too much time. But to really talk about humans, we have to talk about our planet. And what I'm really trying to impart with this talk is how little time we have had to evolve to what we are dealing with today. And so we started with the Big Bang. And this is one of the theories. It's not necessarily the theory, but this started from a singularity of a high dense, high temperature form and exploded, creating atoms and galaxies and stars and planets. And we are part of all of that. We are matter. And it all came from one place. And we have evidence that this is, hold on, I got to move you all because I can't see how I do that. There we go. This theory, this was, by the way, I didn't even think it was 13.8 billion years ago. And this theory has some evidence behind it, such as cosmic microwave background radiation, light elements, hydrogen and helium, and many other observational pieces of evidence. But right now, in the quantum physics world, they're talking about parallel universes or universes contracting and expanding, but we just don't have the evidence, and this isn't a physics presentation. So I'll just let it at that. So that was 13.8 billion years ago. Earth formed from about 4.1 to 3.8 billion years ago. And this is kind of what it looked like. It was like a hot molten ball of rock. It was going intense geological activity. There was no oxygen in the environment. There was gases, carbon dioxide, methane, ammonia. Over time, as it continued to cool down, we did have something called the Great Oxidation Event, which is when we started to have oxygen in our universe, and we began to have some simple cell beings. This large ocean is called Thalassic, and it is, as I was talking to you about oxidation in the event, this little picture here is a banded iron formation. This is in Western Australia. And when a rock turns red, it is because it has been exposed to oxygen. And this particular rock is 1.8 billion years old, maybe more. And I just happened to have gone to this rock and actually have a piece of it, and swam in the sediment there. So, and that was right before I had a nervous breakdown. So I love all the parallels that are happening. So as I try for you to grasp just how small a time we're in, we're going to just kind of go from outward to inward. And this is one clock. This is, I think, one of the easiest ways to describe it. Even then it's hard, but you can see on this 12-hour clock, the simple-celled organisms started here, went all the way to here, and then we start to get animals and land plants that all derive from one, very old simple organism, but separately. And we have animals developing. The dinosaurs hit about here, and I don't know if you guys know how old dinosaurs are, but they're 230 million years old, and they're kind of a lot in our popular society. That's kind of what we talk about a lot. But they haven't been here very long. And then if you go to humankind, it's what is it? It's 42 seconds of the time on that clock. You've just been through 42 seconds right about now. And that's it. That's how long we've been here. And in the last 50 years, which we'll talk about later, which is very important, it is 0.17 seconds is what we would represent on a clock as to how long we have been here. Just briefly, this is the geologic time scale. I just wanted to show this one because you can see how long Earth has been here. And we show up right about there. These are some of the life forms that have developed going up to man. Every single one of these boundaries that you see is an extinction event. This extinction here, Ordovician, it was considered the second largest extinction in history from a combination of factors like glaciation, sea level changes, and possible volcanic activity. Few more, but the big one that we all know about, of course, is the dinosaur extinction, which was about 66 million years ago. And this extinction happened, and you can see the evidence of it worldwide on something we call the KT boundary. It's a layer of sediment all the way everywhere on Earth. And it was a large asteroid that hit the Earth and covered it in volcanic or ash, or just cooled down the Earth that much. And a lot of animals went extinct at this time. Nobody's ever found the crater. They have looked for it, but it's probably subsided under another continent. So we were talking about the ocean, and we start to get these bacteria going. And then as we start to get some oxygen, we begin to have single-celled living things. We begin to get reproduction and start to evolve into fish, to land plants, to shells. And this is how geologists work when they're dating things, is they look for what animals they can find. And as this present time that we're living in is called the Cenozoic, and this particular time in man is called the Quaternary. Jumping ahead or behind, whatever way you want to look at it, I just wanted to show you one particular point in history, which was 320 million to 190 million years ago. And where we all are right now, we were all on this giant landmass. It was not the continents as we know it. And dinosaurs weren't even around when this was here. There were reptiles, amphibians, insect, marine life, and those are just a few examples. But dinosaurs didn't emerge until the breakup of this large landmass, and the giant ocean was called Pantholassus. So when you look here, dinosaurs have not appeared yet. So we're right around here. So this isn't very long ago. And when I talk about the continents drifting apart, this is what Pangaea looks like. And I don't know what you guys know about geology or plates, but what we've found out over time is that the Earth has a crust, and it's constantly moving from the energy generated at our core. And some continents move because of volcanoes, and some move from the ocean expanding up and putting energy, like the Pacific Ocean is continually growing as we speak. And so over 100 million years, this graphic shows how this split apart into what we know of today. And I just love this graphic. So here we are. This is pretty much what it looks like today. And this is pretty much about when, mankind, it was like this when mankind came around. And mankind came around about 3 to 5 million years ago. It wasn't human. So humanoids refer to any creature that has human-like characteristics: upright posture, bipedal, large brain size compared to body mass. And there are notable ones that are shown here. One is called the Australopithecines. They were from about 4 to 2 million years ago. Let me see, are they on here? I don't think they even made it on here, but you see that picture on the bottom right? That's a famous fossil that was found in Africa, and her name is Lucy, and she is one of the whatever they are. Getting closer to our time, all of these humanoid species existed at the same time. It wasn't one and then one and then one and then one. There were many different ones, and we don't have a huge amount of data on this, but this is what's being explored continuously. And Homo erectus, where's Homo erectus? Homo erectus is not on here. Homo erectus was about 1.8 million years ago, and it became extinct about 140,000 years ago. Us, Homo sapiens, started about 400,000 years ago, and this is us right here. And these other humanoids, some of them can be found, some of them were pretty close to where we are. And I'm not completely sure, but I think that there's a small tribe in Africa that kind of is a different species almost that is still there. But something happened around here that made us be the ones to survive versus all of these other ones. And the closest one that everybody kind of knows about is Neanderthal. And as humans, we were on the same planet with them, and so we did encounter them, and we did interbreed with them. And so many people have Neanderthal genes. My husband, I think, the most out of everyone. That's what I tell him anyway. So what did happen? Why are we here and nobody else is here? We had something called the language revolution, and it was about 70,000 years ago. And this was a pivotal moment. And it was the emergence of complex language capabilities and the ability to communicate. But it relies on something called recursive language. And this is a language to be able to imagine and communicate infinite number of novel images with high fidelity. We're able to talk to somebody else and imagine together. And as we are able to do that, we begin to think outside of ourselves and understand the larger thing. Other humans, Neanderthals, they did have language. They had language, but it was mostly limited to words, and there wasn't, much perspective or imagination. They're trying to prove that Neanderthals had mourning sites. I was reading about this recently, because one of the things I'm always talking about is the reason we know this was a big change is that this is when we start to see all the burial sites all over the world, as people began to imagine and understand that death was something that would happen. And without that, I'm sure that they mourned. I mean, I'm sure if somebody you loved died, it wasn't that you didn't mourn, but there was no sort of, oh, I wonder what happens next. It was more of a impulsive sort of imagination. We had our brains developed genetic factors, particularly in the regions of language and processing, genetic variation, and like these environmental interactions with our others. So when you think about it this way, what tribe of humanoids developed this? And some people think it's just one tribe from Africa of like 30,000 people that developed this, and we've all come from them, even though we've seen all the other ones around. Other people think that it was concurrent and global. Either way, it occurred at the same time, and that's when we began to develop. And so what I mean by imagination is just that imagination that, oh, look, here's a person and we can put a lion head on that. Like, imagine that. And that's called the lion head man. He's in a museum in Great Britain. And then there's this cave painting, for example, where this is a person with a bird head and they're holding a bird stick. And this we didn't see before, just even imagining that you could have a bird head was not something around. And there was at this time a fast migration to Australia by boats around 60,000 years ago. And as I was saying before, we started to see dwellings and burials and all kinds of other things. And this is how we lived. We lived a nomadic life in groups of maybe 300 or so. And these groups were held together by gossip. I don't know if you guys know that gossip is evolutionary. Everybody gossips, and we're made to feel bad that we do, but it really is an important tool as long as it's used well. So what did gossiping do for these, tribes of like 300, 350? It had social bonding. So within social groups, it was a mechanism, and people would share information about others, and it can foster a sense of closeness and solidarity. And it helps strengthen the social connections, which in turn can enhance cooperation and mutual support, which is important. Information exchange. People could exchange information about their environment, about other of the people in their group. There was social norm enforcement, which was particularly important. You could, if there was somebody in the tribe not acting along with the expectations and norms, they could exert pressure on that person to conform, or they face the social consequence of being ostracized from their tribe. And that is they're going to basically die if they are separated because they're not cooperating with anyone. And so this kind of form of ostracization is particularly deep within us. It's not in our reptile brain, but it's pretty close. So we all experience rejection. We learn how to deal with it as we get older, but when it happens, when a group of people kind of kick you out, like, it is very deep and it will hurt. There's kind of no way around it. You will feel it because it's just in our evolution to be within a society and have support. And when you're suddenly by yourself, this is going to have it can cause extensive anxiety and depression. And, we've all, I don't know about you all, but I have experienced, of course, being teased and gossiped about, and it was pretty traumatic. Today's kids are getting it all the time, and it's out of control with the social media. So we really have to help our children navigate this. Anything else? So I think that's about it about gossiping. Oh, you could, there was entertainment. So, the person in the group who was, there was someone, like me, like trying to get attention, doing all that kind of stuff. So it's deeply intertwined in our psychology and behavior. And, I like to say, rather than gossip, I think I like to be generous towards the person, but I do like to talk about the traits and everything. I don't think there's any of us who don't want to. It's built within us. This is a photo, and I just wanted to show you, this was the last ice age before now, and we were on Earth during this ice age, as were Neanderthals. Back to the early humans, there were a bunch of migration patterns. One's called the out of Africa, and these were the earliest humans. And so have gone this way, and there was expansion to Eurasia. And so each of these numbers means how many years ago. So most of life, from about 230,000 to 130,000, was in Africa. It wasn't anywhere else. And the language revolution was 70,000 years ago. And I'm kind of just now kind of looking at this. There is that great migration right there, and some other migrations. So that language helped. And then we see, as we're getting further and further, where the migration continues, and we get into North America. About 25,000 years ago, during that ice age, there was a land bridge. And down here, we get into North America, and we get down to South America, down here to Peru, where we have the Incans, over here, where we have the Mayans. Just fascinating stuff going on there. This is my representation of where did the Neanderthals go? Well, they didn't even make it to this time. So this was 25,000 years ago. And this is looking at where we are and South America as to where the migration has happened. So we're living in nomadic societies. We're roaming, we're migrating. And then there was a huge thing called the agricultural revolution. And we moved from hunter-gatherer to more settled. And there were positive and negative effects from this, which I'll go over. This is a ruin called Jericho, and it is in Gaza. And it is considered one of the oldest cities. It's not the oldest city. The other one's in Iraq, and there's one somewhere else. But what's interesting about this particular one is there are 29 strata, we call it, of occupation of humans. And it testifies to these contexts, namely going from nomad to agriculture to the Bronze Age, up to kind of where we, modern life, with a society, with a hierarchy, and it's all within one place. And it just struck me when I found this, with what's happening right now, why that part of the earth is so valued. And this, because it is one of the oldest cities, and Israel people have always been here. So, and as others, and there's a huge feeling people get when they go to Israel, and that land is what is being fought over. So there were good and there were bad effects. More food security, both improved nutrition and malnutrition, because it could be less diverse. There was a higher reliance on starchy foods, which led to tooth decay, and too many grain diets with too many carbohydrates, which, as we kept going and going up to where we are now, we're having all kinds of health issues from that. As we
Tracy?
got closer and closer and became societies, we got the disease became an issue because we were close together. And the lifestyle, the development of the social hierarchies began. So we're talking about 10,000 years ago is when this started. I'm just jumping from here, and I want you to from here to about now. I from zero to like 1500. There's all kinds of history and all kinds of things, and I bet Natalie would be able to give us a really good talk about that time. But why did some survive and some didn't? This is in Peru, a very holy place. You can see the agricultural plains. The Incans were incredibly advanced. Hiking up to Machu Picchu is a religious experience for most. Why didn't they survive? There's a book called Guns, Germs, and Steel by Jared Diamond, and it explains why some places survived and others didn't. And germs, of course, we understand, but so the Incans in particularly, they were conquered by Spain. First, they were weakened by the diseases that came with them. And then the Spanish had weapons, firearms, and cavalry. Domestication of plants and animals, the spread of technologies, language and cultural
Tracy?
diffusion, the migration patterns, as we saw, and urbanization. So,
Tracy?
what?
Tracy?
Mhm.
15 minutes.
15 minutes? Okay, we're good. So, as we just mentioned, in the Incan downfall, germs were primarily responsible. They weakened them, and this has happened all over time. And there's something called the Columbian Exchange, which I think is the one we're most aware of here in North America, which is, Columbus came over and gave all the Indians smallpox and measles, influenza, and this just happened everywhere. So between germs and weapons and different cultures, we can understand why we are where we are. And so I really highly recommend that book. There was one that I read that actually we sent back somewhere, which was syphilis, and we sent it back to Africa. So sometimes we'll go the other direction. But yeah, Europeans pretty much conquered most of the North American world. The Industrial Revolution, I'm going to just jump up to that, like I was saying. It was in 1850. Prior to that, where you see this little cow here, we call that the pre-industrial revolution, where they were starting to make tools. They were starting to have other, animals or plows to help them generate food. But when we really get to the Industrial Revolution, that's when our health has declined. It has health effects. It has some positive ones. There was improved sanitation. There were advances in medicine. There was better nutrition. But the negative health effects have outweighed that. We have pollution, of course, which has increased the air and water. It's from factories, mines, urbanization, gas, oil. It's resulted in respiratory diseases, bronchitis, asthma, as well as, what we're all kind of dealing with in this group, which is autoimmune. We have occupational hazards with workers in factories and mines getting exposed to chemicals. We have overcrowded and unsanitary living conditions, most in the world, but more than we have sanitized. And overall, it has led to increased illness, and illness not just in the sense of pollution, but also illness in the sense of the way society changed, because we began this kind of introduced capitalism and introduced kind of more of the class system that we know of, that has gotten to an extreme point at this point where you're either rich or poor, and sort of there's nothing in between. So, there were some good things but mostly we know now, it's been a negative effect. It's nothing we could have stopped. I think, I would think if there were other species like this on any other planet, I think we're all self-limiting. I think every species would develop until they destroyed themselves. Um, and again, I'm talking at very small time. So when you're talking about, gee, are there aliens and other planets? Well, sure. You've got 13 billion years to work on. You only have a small amount of time where you would see a life form. So sure, somewhere, definitely, but I don't think we'll find it. The 20th century has been interesting and fascinating in so many different ways, and also extremely damaging. Um, this is a photo called the Earthrise, and it was taken by an astronaut named William Anders during the Apollo 8 mission in 1968. And nobody had seen Earth from this perspective before. And it showed Earth as a fragile, interconnected planet, um, floating in the vastness of space, devoid of borders or boundaries. And this shift emphasized the unity of humanity, and gave rise to the environmental movement and the environmental conscious. It played a big role in that, prompting people to reflect on the human activities. It prompted space exploration, which made our science develop even more quickly because we were in the space race with Russia, and they were, it was just advanced computers were developed. Everything was done in such a small, short amount of time. And so some of the names of the ages are not necessarily set in stone, but a couple would be like the nuclear age, the electronic age, and the digital age, which is what we are in right now. And this is a different clock, but it's similar. And in this clock, the post-agricultural humans are 1.4 seconds. But if you look over here, I'm just like, look at this guy. So this is like the last 50 years. And that's 0.17 second. I mean, I just went over that. It just ended. In this 0.17 seconds, we are developing so quickly. There has been no parallel in history as to what is going to happen to us as a species. We have an idea, obviously, with global warming. I wonder about language, because when I was looking at the language development, I'm wondering, God, what will language look like in 100 years when most of our young children now are starting out with screens? Maybe it will disappear. I don't know, but we will survive the hopefully the global warming, but we will most likely, not many of us will, and we will evolve into something else. I wish I could be there to see what happens, but I can't. So out of everything we've talked about, the environmental issues are the biggest issue in terms of our health. And autoimmune illness has exploded. 1 in 5 people are suffering from an autoimmune disease. Every single person there has either a relative, a spouse, a child, a friend, a boss. It is affecting everybody. The people in our groups, many of you here are living with these, and you know just how hard it is to live with this. And there are a lot of theories about autoimmune issues and why we have them. Environmental, of course. Aging, our immune system becomes less able to cope with foreign bodies, or maybe start to attack itself. Molecular mimicry, I'll leave that up to somebody to explain in another talk. Loss of tolerance. Hygiene, of course. hormonal factors, which are actually bigger than you would think. The foods that we eat have hormones in them. Our hormones are changing because of stressors around us. Uh, some people are talking about our guts having leaky gut syndrome, and that's causing a lot of it. But in summary, what I'm trying to say is everything around us, all the pollution, everything else, it's literally impacting us on a cellular level. Toxic stress is hurting our cells at a level that is tiny. And we are developing all kinds of different cells. Something called a mast cell has decided to come in, and it is an inflammatory cell. And a lot of people suffer from that. And what's happening, there's stress, oxidative stress, inflammation, DNA damage. We have epigenetic changes, which is a whole talk in itself. All of the immune system, but essentially what's happening is we are able to attack a cell, attack a virus with antigens or antibodies, and this is a visualization of COVID. And so when you get a virus like COVID, which is that cell, you can see all these antibodies are being generated by our immune system, and they come and then they find the virus, and then boom, boom, the virus goes away. That's how it works. And interestingly enough, COVID is an inflammatory virus, which is different from most of our respiratory illnesses. And we're having a lot of people with long COVID showing up, and it acts very similar to autoimmune disease. And in particular, there are a lot of people who are developing heart issues, something called POTS, postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome, which is very debilitating. And it essentially is if you stand up, people who stand up that are very intolerant to that, their heart rates skyrocket, their blood pressure drops, and in the serious cases, they pass out. But it is, imagine living like that. You have a set of stairs you have to go up to. Every time you stand up, you pass out, and it's happening more and more. And I'm, assuming it's happening to people that are more genetically predisposed, again, to these autoimmune issues. This is a chromosome, and what you're seeing there on the edge of each one is called a telomere, and they protect our chromosomes from being frayed or tangled. So when we're talking about epigenetics, that's kind of what we're talking about. And as we age and as things begin to invade our cells, we begin to get shortening of these telomeres, and the cells eventually die. Is it doing anything? Oops. Okay, it had a thing it was going to do, but no biggie. You can get genetic testing for mental illness, for any kind of illness, and that is one of the things that they look at are the telomeres or the alleles, and you can see, oh my goodness, genetically this has happened, and that is why I'm experiencing such anxiety, or I have this disease. Epigenetics is the expression of like a damage. So when you're in your mother's womb and there's a lot of stress, we end up damaging the amygdala and whatever DNA is associated with that. And you can get this tested, and it's really interesting. So biology is not my strong point, as Charlotte knows. So have her come talk about it. But bring it back down, we've talked about the environment, physical environment, but we've also got this other environmental issue, which is trauma and isolation. And we have an epidemic of trauma and isolation going on. And trauma experiences in childhood, we have seen, have been proven to cause damage to cells and to cause 9 out of 10 of the most deadly diseases. This was a study done at Kaiser. I don't have time. That's again a whole other talk. But Gabor Mate really summarizes it by saying much of what we call personality is not a fixed set of traits. It's our coping mechanisms that we acquired in childhood as we dealt with whatever was going on around us. We develop a bit like some people might be hypervigilant, some people might hide in a closet, anxiety, all of that is happening, and we're using parts of our personality. There's something called fawning, where you're a people pleaser to try to get through life. So what is our personality really? It's kind of an interesting question. Trauma is not what happens to you, but what happens inside you. For those of you who don't know much about trauma, like everyone here does, but trauma is not an event, it's a reaction to an event. As humans, we are evolved to recover from trauma. Not everybody gets PTSD from experiencing a trauma. We're also evolved to recover from grief. When you put us into the environment we're in right now in modern times, we're getting less and less able to cope with these exposures because we are being bombarded 24/7 with stress, with the news, with the way we live our lives. We have cortisol pumping way too much and damaging our adrenal glands. And you've all heard of the tiger hypothesis, where you basically are designed to have this kind of trauma response, not very often. And we're having it every day, and not only every day, but multiple times a day. And if you add in isolation with that, we've got no support. And we know as scientists that social support mitigates health. People that have support can adhere to treatment plans. They have people coming around, playing a role in promoting adherence to the treatment plans, promote healthy behaviors. It buffers the effects of adversity and illness. Social support is extremely important, and we have barely any of it now. It has improved mental health. We all do the best we can not to be isolated, but especially those of us with chronic illness. This is a very potent thing that we are dealing with as humans, and it makes it even harder to live with it. And this is what we look like now. We are all in a group looking at screens. Even adults, we're all doing this. I saw a woman breastfeeding, looking at her phone, and I was kind of taken aback. In one way, I was like, oh, that would have been great. I could have just done that. But it's not, though, because I was bonding with my son and my daughter. I was, rubbing their head and looking in their eyes. And if your mother's looking at a cell phone, that's not happening. And isolation increases our feelings of being threatened and insecure. So again, we're going back to that population of nomads of 300 people. When you are not in that group, you are feeling threatened. And we are doing, again, this is a very deep level. So you may think, I'm fine. I'm an introvert. I'm fine being alone here in the house. It's fine. It is. You can cope with it, but there's something deep in your body that knows this isn't too good. This isn't great for me. And it's expressing itself through your body. Just a brief slide to show the increase of autoimmune disorders, and I think it's much higher than that number there, 50 million. And finally, a note to the angry, ill person. Most of us that deal with illness have a lot of anger and what ifs and why the health system is failing us and all of that. And we are in a society that emphasizes positivity. You only hear about the people with cancer, how they fought cancer. They fought it, and they're brave. And, my story wouldn't be that. It would be she was miserable, but, she did whatever she could. So there's a molecular researcher who wrote that compulsive positive thinkers are more likely to develop illness. which is an interesting point of I'm pushing away anything that's negative. I'm going to think positively, compulsively. And your body is like, I don't think so. I think I'm going to get all of that data and put it into my body. So what we want, we more genuine, positive thinking, deeply positive being. It empowers us to know that we have nothing to fear from the truth. And health is not just a matter of thinking happy thoughts. And Gabor Mate says sometimes the biggest impetus to healing can come from jumpstarting the immune system with a burst of long suppressed anger or the healthy experience of it. And most of you know me, and I have a grief perspective on illness, and anger, of course, is one of the emotions, and we cannot skip over our grief emotions. We do have to go through them, and we can do that with help and support so that we can have space to intentionally feel these feelings, talk about these feelings, and then go about our day and, try to make our quality of life and find things that help us to live with this. So these are the three books I implore you to get. Guns, Germs, and Steel. Sapiens is absolutely amazing. And The Myth of Normal by Gabor Mate. So thank you. Did I make it in the right time? Okay. So what do y'all think?
Well, you said, that a lot of different civilizations or groups have just disappeared. You, um, because evolution, I mean, for me, the definition of evolution is the traits or characteristics that match or that are successful in the current climate environment. Those are the species or the individuals in a species that will survive. So I think that's why, in case you wanted to, my opinion.
Yeah, no. What are you talking about specifically right now, though? About now?
About what?
About now,
About now? Well, these, well, okay, then that leads me to another point that I wanted to make, and that is that in studies of populations, that there's a population limiting factor. And I believe that we have overpopulated the earth. And whenever a population gets too big, these limiting factors kind of bring it back down. And I think that's what's happening. I think with the plagues, I think with the hunger, the starvation, food insecurity, the flooding, I don't know. I mean, just, rats, if they're confined, they start fighting. Anyway, so that's what I think is happening, is that we've got a global population limiting factors happening. So people don't, if population, I don't know, if people don't take it on themselves to kind of limit their reproduction, then these limiting factors will do it for us.
Yeah, I think, and I forgot to kind of mention that geologists and sociologists have a name for this last 150 years. No, actually, from the last 10,000 years, called they call it the Anthropocene, which is where mankind has taken over, and we're the dominating species, and we are facing a mass extinction with global warming. So, which is ironic, because that's what happened to Neanderthals. They hadn't developed a way to cope with all of that. So we are having a mass extinction. We've already started it with all the animals and plants and things, and we're all feeling that sadness, which doesn't help. Natalie. Yep.
Hey, when you made your PowerPoint, you know, like on the screen, I couldn't enlarge it. I can't, can the PowerPoint be made more, you know, large for the screen?
That's a good question. It can be made.
Never mind.
You need a bigger screen. Yeah,
Oh, I do? Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Natalie, did you have something you wanted to say?
I think it's just amazing to see the evolution of the earth and humanity within that, and so like part of me is like feels the heaviness of the reality of where we're at, and the other part of me feels the like this is part of the cycle, and we're in this cycle, and death and rebirth is part of this cycle. It's like, how can we really step into that? And like Tracy, as you mentioned, like those feelings of like anger and grief and the things that the emotions that we are told that we're not allowed to feel are the emotions that we need in a whole space to feel and really step into where we are in evolution, and how we like come alongside each other and support each other in this moment, rather than the toxic positivity and pretending that everything's fine all the time. But really, like, how do we step up and feel the things and be in the things and recognize this moment and really be here in this moment.